Hi, and welcome. We are here to talk about how everyone can be an ally in improving diversity and inclusion in science. Materials from this talk are shared under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. Feel free to tweet questions or slides. Natural history collections have historically and currently benefit from colonialism. Specimens shipped on board slave ships, glorifying empires, promoting exploitation, stolen objects, and so much more. The time for acknowledgement is long overdue. We must acknowledge that through our science, we have and continue to impact Indigenous peoples. It is our hope that we can leave this session with mindfulness to actively pursue discussions and resolution around land acknowledgement and repatriation. Since this is a virtual conference, I know we're all based in different locations. We are joining you from Gainesville, Florida, which is the territory of many nations, including the Seminole and Timucua peoples. We encourage all to learn about and educate others on the contemporary work of the Indigenous nations whose land we are on, and to endeavor to support Indigenous sovereignty in all the ways that we can. We are part of the Gainesville Ally Skills Network, a group of people who want academic institutions to be more inclusive and equitable. We achieve this by training and educating everyone into becoming allies. I'm Molly Phillips. I'm from the IDBio Project, and I work at the Florida Museum, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi, my name is Hao Yi. I am the reproducibility librarian at the University of Florida, and my pronouns are he, him, his. So why do we need allies in STEM? Well, this figure from Estrada et al. In 2016 shows that as you increase in academic rank, the representation of underrepresented minorities decreases with increasing rank. And it's believed that all we need to do to rectify this problem and make sure that there's equal representation is to promote interest in STEM and continue to recruit minorities into academic and STEM fields, and that the problem will eventually work itself out. Unfortunately, this has been the refrain for many decades, and representation has continued to remain basically flat. So clearly more is needed, and we believe ally skills are the way to go. So before we get a little bit more into exactly what those are, I'm going to go through a few definitions. So the first is that privilege is an unearned advantage that society gives to some people, but not others. And oppression is a systemic inequality that is present throughout society, which benefits people with more privilege and harms those with fewer privileges. Some further definitions: a marginalized person is a member of a group that is the primary target of a system of oppression, and an ally is a person who enjoys some privilege in some situation and who works to end oppression and understand their own privilege. And here we focus on the fact that ally is less about an identity that one claims for oneself and more specifically about the actions that one is taking to dismantle these systems of oppression and understand privilege. Some additional definitions about diversity and inclusion, since I know that those are often confounded with each other. Diversity is the state of having people in a group who differ along different axes, such as race, gender, sexuality, etc. And inclusion is really about having everyone in a group being valued, included, and respected without discrimination or bias. And so what is wrong with some of the efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in academia and in STEM today? Well, there's a lot of focus on helping marginalized people fit into some of these existing systems of oppression. So, for example, those programs that seek to recruit minorities and underrepresented minorities into existing academic structures. And there's not much focus on training allies or accomplices to help change what the systems are and to dismantle how those systems of oppressions actually work. And there's a reason that these efforts are like this, and we believe that it's because it's often easier to ask marginalized groups to fit into existing systems. Members of marginalized groups directly benefit from such programs and are therefore more self-motivated to participate. Members of marginalized groups are often more aware of oppression and how it affects them. In many cases, they're often of lower status or lower rank, and so it's easier for people to tell them what to do. And they're also seen as the cause of some of the problems. Furthermore, directing some of these efforts of diversity and inclusion at marginalized people means that we can avoid confronting people who actually have power and privilege to change the systems in academia and some of these systems of oppression. It also helps people avoid retaliation from those, from the people and groups who have power and privilege in these systems. And so that's why we don't want to focus on marginalized people. It's because they are often overworked, they're under more stress, they have less money, they're retaliated against, they're in a minority, so there are fewer of them to act and promote change, and so it takes more work, and they have less power and influence in these systems. So if we relied solely on underrepresented minorities and members of marginalized groups to make change in the systems, it would take a long time and progress would be slow, and that's kind of what we have seen so far. So instead, we want to focus our efforts in diversity and inclusion on promoting allies and allyship actions, because allies have more time, energy, and money. There are more potential allies to do the work of increasing diversity and inclusion, and allies benefit from power and influence and are therefore less likely to be harmed by trying to change some of these systems. Some of the ways that you can participate in allyship include.
All right, so yeah, we don't have a lot of time with you guys this time, so we're going to talk about micro allyship, or 5 different ways that you can take on daily tiny micro tasks to grow and improve yourself as an ally. And this term was coined by Nihat Batra. So the first tip is amplify. One resource that allies have are their social networks. People with more privilege are often well connected to other people with even more privilege and power. Encourage people on your social networks to donate to those same nonprofits. Amplify the voices of activists you follow. Connect people from marginalized groups with mentors or opportunities that will help them grow or raise their visibility, and escalate problems to the attention of people who can address them. Tell people why an issue matters to you and bring your influence to bear on setting goals and priorities. Especially, we as museum professionals have a huge opportunity and also a responsibility to amplify voices of marginalized groups within our own systems. The next tip is to attribute, and that means to give credit to the original creators, give credit when credit is due. A great example of this would be the Me Too movement. The hashtag goes viral after a tweet from Alyssa Milano, but in fact the movement was started by Tarana Burke to raise awareness of the pervasiveness of sexual harassment and assault. For natural history museums, this looks like giving credit to the hidden figures in our collections, including enslaved people, indigenous people, and women that have been historically ignored by our community despite their contributions. The third tip is volunteer, and that means to volunteer your time to make sure work is shared equitably. In your lab or collection, this could mean you could establish rules and a code of conduct. You make sure everyone has a voice and is heard, especially because marginalized groups are perceived to take up more time and space than they actually are. Rotating office housework, so volunteering to take notes, organizing events, cleaning, you buy the cake this time. And this is because marginalized groups are often expected to do more. So as a lab or collection leader or PI, do not ask for volunteers. It's much better to create maybe a rotational schedule. And then if you don't have time, give money. People with more privilege tend to have more money. It's easier to spend money than time. Consider contributing to scholarships, paying for marginalized groups to teach you, like bringing a speaker into the museum that you work at, donating to nonprofits that fight oppression, etc. For example, if you're not able to help at protests, you can donate to legal defense funds. The fourth tip we have is to self-educate. And that, of course, means to learn about oppression and how to counteract it, both individually and also at the institutional level. And on that note, thank you for coming to this session. I hope you're all able to continue to self-educate on this topic. One way to self-educate is to follow leaders from marginalized groups. People with privilege are often used to being leaders and in control, and are encouraged to think they know more about everything. Often privileged folks will start their own programs to help marginalized people without consulting with them. are finding out what already exists. The thing is, most marginalized people know way more about the problems they're facing and usually have already started their own programs to make things better. They just need the support and money and influence of privileged folks, which they can't get if people with privilege are off doing their own feel-good thing. The final is to ask. Ask about the best ways to act. People want to be supported differently, so ask for feedback on how best to recognize them. Another really important part is retaliation is common occurrence. Don't put marginalized groups in harm's way without their consent.
So some general tips for responding to situations and problematic behavior is to be firm and direct about the behavior itself, and I'll try to avoid the trap of being an academic and trying to educate about some of the issues. And so being firm and direct about the behavior itself is what we encourage, and to also avoid criticizing the offender or using humor, because this can often result in harm to other groups, especially if the criticism involves things like appearance or mental illness or disability. Simple responses are also very much fine and okay for responding to incidents as they occur. Things like yikes, or we don't do or say that here. And then finally, to pick your battles, to make your point and move on so that you can focus your time and energy on mitigating harm instead of trying to correct and educate someone who is unwilling to learn or actually change their behavior. When you do respond to incidents, you may also make mistakes. That is going to happen because everyone is human. And so we want to make sure that you also have the skills to apologize as necessary. And it's important when apologizing to acknowledge what you did, to thank the person who pointed out your mistake, and commit to doing better without creating a situation where someone else has to make you feel better about your mistake. And so to not make your mistakes about you, but acknowledging that they happened and resolving to do better in the future. So in conclusion, we realize that a lot of diversity and inclusion efforts do tend to focus on marginalized people, but these members of marginalized groups have less time, energy, power, and influence, which is why we need allies who have the ability to make change and call for action to stand up and take action. And furthermore, these ally skills can be learned, which is why we promote through our group ally skill workshops to focus on training people in these ally skills. If you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to either Molly or I on Twitter, or to email our group email account at alligatorallyskills@googlegroups.com. And one of our instructors, leaders, facilitators will be able to get back to you. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Howard and Molly. It's a really wonderful contribution to look at our own actions beyond our collections work. So thanks for doing that. And thanks for coming from so far away today as well. I want to pick up on just a really, really small point that you made in there, which was about looking at the kind of decolonial work of celebrating those hidden histories, those people behind major accomplishments in the history of science in our museum displays, and looking at that as part of allyship. And is that what you're saying? I hadn't thought about that as a kind of as a role to take in allyship. Is that what you were saying? Do you see that as a form of allyship?
I think I'll answer because I added that. We give these ally talks to a huge variety of different audiences, and so when I was looking at our slides that we use often, I kind of was looking at it finally in the framework of my own job of working in a museum. And yeah, I definitely think that allyship is about individuals' actions, and so individuals and museums can work on decolonizing, promoting decolonizing work, raising awareness about decolonization in natural history museums, doing all the work that all these speakers have been talking about. That is kind of the work of an ally at the individual level. Institutionally, of course, it's different, but I think very much so on the individual level, it's ally work and accomplice work. There's a lot of also, I feel like, variations on the term ally as well, which we could talk about, but yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that, Hal?
I'm not really. I very much agree with Molly. I think acknowledging the history of collections is very important because I think it's an area that so many people don't actually realize and like comprehend the full history of, at least in the United States. There's a lot of historical culture around Native Americans, but not an awareness that, for instance, many of the peoples and their tribes still exist. So I think making sure that that information gets across when we talk about our collections and our exhibits is very important.
Thanks. I just had a question coming. Can you repeat who originated the term micro-allyship?
Yes, that we found that from Neha Batra online. I'm gonna try and dig out the,
I just pulled it.
tweet and put it.
Yeah. Yeah, I put the handle in the chat already, but not the tweet.
And I guess this is more of a comment. Thank you for your insight. And there's a really great point about not asking the marginalized people to change and fit in, but the other way around, ask the privileged to change.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I do agree that a lot of the things that we went over, especially for this audience, can be basic, but we always start with these basic definitions. So we're all on the same like level playing field and making sure that we're all talking about the same concepts, because I'm sure in your daily lives, you have, had multiple, instances where you think everyone is on the same page and they really are not. And I think that's a lot about allyship too, is being really transparent and obvious about what you're talking about when you mean diversity and inclusion.
We've probably got time for this one more question. Do you involve marginalized communities as critical friends in your work? And if so, how?
I guess it's my turn to go first. So in my new position in the libraries, which I started in May of this year, one of the things that we focus on is surveys of our communities and our patrons to figure out how we can make our environment more accessible. So one thing that we have collected, so not me personally because I wasn't around when the survey was developed and sent out, but physical accessibility of like the space, how comfortable people are as caregivers and having like families and children in the space, and accessibility for people who are not as comfortable using English, so international students or other kinds of international guests who just want to feel like they are able to access the resources and be able to interact with our staff and our faculty and get their questions resolved without feeling like there's a pressure to have to speak English at a certain level to engage.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think we'll end this one there. So thank you again to Molly and Hal for joining us.